students walk onto the Hastings College campus for the first time, they enter a new world and transition into the next chapter of their lives. Between dorm living and small class sizes, friends are made fast. And it isn't long before the nerve-wracking feeling that many have going off to college settles. Strangers on day one quickly become familiar faces. And as weeks, months, even years go by, these faces become more well-known. But what exactly are college students known for? Merely their accomplishments and roles on campus? With at least 18 years of previous life experience that make up who they are, there is more to your peers than what meets the eye. I have come across 3 reputable HC students in particular who are all involved in multiple facets of campus life, and each have an impressive list of achievements. Yet there is more to their stories below the surface. Currently a junior, Carly Spots-Falzone has made a name for herself at Hastings College in more ways than one. She's a member of both the communications and academic honoraries, and has served on the Artist Lecture Series Student Symposium for the last 2 years. To top all of this off, Carly devotes a majority of her time to the forensics team. Many on campus recognize Carly because of her commitment and drive, but according to several of her peers, she is also notable for her kind heart and joyful personality.
Daddy Dave, one of my dads, always says, "Oh, we're so boring." Literally, our story is not cool. We just have a family, and we live in the suburbs, and we love each other, and we have kids. You know, our story is not that interesting.
Carly Spots-Falzone was adopted into this family in 1997, but her story begins before her and her twin brother were born.
My parents met my birth mom the night before she gave birth to me, and my birth mom and my birth dad weren't together, so my brother and I weren't technically meant to be, and so they didn't even really want to go through with the pregnancy, and they probably would have gotten an abortion had they known about it earlier.
While Carly's birth mom was in labor, her future guardians were encouraged to rethink their decision.
The doctor went in and looked at my birth mom's condition and realized she had had no prenatal care. They were addicted to meth and drugs, and he said, "These kids are going to be messed up. If I were you, I would walk away right now."
But John Falzone and David Spots stuck around, and Carly thanks them for this in a poetry program.
It wasn't until recently I realized how gay my upbringing was. I told my coworkers that my parents made me memorize Barbra Streisand songs in case there was a Broadway agent at the next restaurant we went to. They laughed. I learned polo should always be worn collar up, and RuPaul's advice is equivalent to the word of God. I miss the silent giggles and writing one dad's name under the mother section on school forms, and the naive pride during Mother's Day activities, announcing I was not writing a card for my mother, but instead to the men who gave me life.
In 1993, Carly's dads became the first gay couple to jointly adopt a child in Los Angeles County. This little girl became an older sister 4 years later when they brought Carly and her twin brother Mac home.
So they're kind of this groundbreaking case, which is amazing because they're not only my mentors and leaders for life, but also kind of mentors and leaders for so many social justice movements and stuff. So it's really cool to have them be leaders in both of those respects.
John and Dave were breaking social norms at the time, so Carly too faced some adversity growing up.
Resilience can be learned and practiced. I learned not to take stupid people's opinions with very much weight, but I didn't understand that it wasn't normal for waiters to assume separate checks every single time our family went out to eat. I didn't know that finding a church that would allow us to worship would be so difficult. So thank you for still setting the example of what a family looks like.
I see you, Daddy.
I've had the privilege of having an incredible upbringing and 2 parents that love me more than anything else, and I love them and respect them more than anything on this entire planet.
Carly is grateful for her unique upbringing and wouldn't change a thing. She even uses speech as a way to voice this. But her opportunity to do so was almost stripped away the summer before her freshman year of college.
I had gone to a summer camp through a college in Minnesota that was basically like Hastings but in Minnesota.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the school, I fell in love with the speech team, I fell in love with everything. And I applied and got in and was ready to go to the team.
But then in late July, during her family vacation in Italy, Carly got word that the funding for the speech program had been cut. So she came back to the U.S. and with only a month left, restarted her college search.
We toured Hastings. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we stepped off and out of our car. We looked around, and I think we were all just like, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna go to college. And then I went home and told my parents, I said, I want to go to Hastings College in Nebraska. And they said, absolutely not.
It was a long way from home and seemed like a rash decision to her dads at the time, but they came around.
We were sitting around, and it was kind of this Hallmark movie moment where my grandpa said, so you're going to the school in Minnesota, right? And I kind of looked at my dad, and I was like, and my dad goes, actually, just going to Hastings College in Nebraska.
3 years later, Carly does miss being close to home, but she's happily studying communications, journalism, and women and gender studies here at Hastings College. And most importantly, she's thriving on the speech team.
I guess my whole life is a testament to the fact that everything will happen for a reason, and everything will fall into place how it should and how it needs to. And you just kind of got to roll with what life throws at you. And I think if you take it on with perseverance and kindness and happiness and optimism, then you'll end up, I think, where you're supposed to be.
Cheese.
Like Carly, our next student is known in several realms of campus. Senior Joseph Quinn studies education and Spanish. Along with Carly, he served on the Artist Lecture Series Student Symposium, and he invests a lot of his time in music, from the a cappella group 125 to the music fraternity Sinfonia. His story begins in his hometown, Hastings, Nebraska.
Life happens the way it does. Yes, it sometimes sucks. Sometimes things don't happen the way you want it to. But you have to learn how to live with it. You have to learn how to make good of it.
Joseph Quinn's birth mother was 17 when she had him in 1994. Her boyfriend skipped town, so she decided to give him up for adoption.
My birth mother was a part of my life for a year-ish. She was over our house pretty much every day.
But then she left, knowing Joseph was in good hands.
My parents were so loving, both of them, and my family, and my relatives and everyone, you know. They never made me feel like I was an adopted child. I was just a member of the family.
Joseph has 3 older brothers and a younger sister.
My sister was also adopted about a year after me. And she had Down syndrome and then suffered from a stroke at birth, so diagnosed with cerebral palsy, which, you know, miraculously, she kind of overcome. It really didn't manifest. In fact, we attribute it to a miracle that we prayed for from St. Padre Pio.
When Joseph looks back on his younger years living on their farm just outside of Hastings, it's full of fond memories.
Growing up out here was awesome. Just all the space to run around with and play with. I mean, we did all sorts of crazy stuff. Play in the insulation foam that's above the barn because we thought it was snow. I mean, my mom was happy when that happened.
It was fun and games for the Quinn kids growing up, but things took a turn when Joseph was 10 and his dad became ill.
He first got it in 2000, and he had some surgeries and stuff to remove it and treatment, and it went into remission. But then it resurged about 2005. And I think March 2005. I remember I was watching TV. It was like night, and we finished dinner. And I think my dad was like waiting for a time to tell my mom because he noticed he had a mole, and he's like, "I'll get it checked." And you know, they did a biopsy on it, and he got the results that day. And they're like, "You have stage 4 malignant melanoma, and it has moved into your lymph system, and we're giving you 6 to 8 months with treatment."
Joseph's dad slowly began to deteriorate, but he spent the following months getting everything in line for the family. Thanksgiving Day came around and he was fighting as hard as he could.
Friday, the day after, was the day he woke up and wasn't himself anymore. He was mentally pretty much gone, and that's when we knew it was only a matter of time.
He passed on Saturday evening.
For a few years it was difficult. I felt I was kind of an angry person inside.
But Joseph found peace in music when he started playing the guitar that his father left for him.
That's my piece of my dad that's really close to me and will always be, is that guitar. I feel like he's there with me when I'm holding it.
Joseph's outlook on life continued to improve when he was offered the chance to study abroad in Venezuela after he graduated high school.
The family that I was with, the friends I made, the people I met, I mean, what a warm and welcoming culture the Venezuelan people are.
This trip boosted Joseph's confidence and revealed his outgoing personality. Shortly after he returned to America, he began studying at Hastings College and is a very active student.
It's just incredible, all these opportunities that I've had and taken advantage of. Like, I never thought I would be this kind of person.
He is now approaching graduation, and while the road has been bumpy, he is optimistic about the path ahead.
As a future educator and teacher, it's not only just teaching kids how to speak Spanish or helping immigrant children learn English.
For Joseph, it's also about guiding others through tough times and helping people to make the best out of their lives, just as he has done with his.
When I say that I wouldn't be the person I am today if my dad didn't die, they're like, well, I mean, he would be here then, and that'd be great and stuff. And I'm like, but that's just a dream, you know? Life happened the way it did. And I had to learn how to deal with it, how to make light of the situation. And I did. I feel like I finally have.
Running in some of the same circles as Joe, our final HC student, Brian Whetstone, is also a member of Sinfonia and active in the music department. He's in the mariachi band, bell choir, and the orchestra. But he truly hits his stride with the history department. The senior history major and women and gender studies minor has paved his way to a bright future. He wrote and published a book at the age of 16, landed Hastings College on the National Register of Historic Places at 22, and among other things, received the most prestigious graduate program scholarship offered on campus. Brian Whetstone wears the face of success, but that's only half of his story. His narrative begins much like any other. Brian was born on June 3, 1995 in Lincoln, Nebraska, followed 2 years later by his little brother, Brooke.
What I remember feeling when I was growing up is that I knew my brother was different and acted different, and I sort of recognized that, but I didn't quite understand why.
Brooke was diagnosed with autism around the age of 3, right around the time the Whetstones moved to Kearney.
I was kind of mad at him, like, some of the time, because he required a lot of attention and care from my parents, and I felt slighted almost.
This is when Brian became somewhat fixated on the idea of normalcy in his life.
It was hard to be at home at times. And, you know, that's not to say that, like, my family and I had great times together, and I love my family so much, and I love my brother so much.
But he found balance by spending time outside of the house and becoming very invested in school activities. However, going into middle school, this outlet became less of a refuge.
There was like this group of kids that just like picked on anyone and everyone. And middle schoolers have this way of targeting the exact thing about yourself that you absolutely hate. And they targeted the fact that I was kind of overweight as a kid.
Brian went into high school self-conscious and anxious, but he would close the door to this darker side and walk into a world of achievement and happiness. Intrigued by historic places, he began working at the Frank Museum in Kearney.
I owe so much of what I want to do to having ever set foot through the door here. Public history is a way of connecting the general public to the history of their communities and the history that they exist in every day but don't necessarily think about. And so this was a way that I was actively helping bring a piece of Kearney's history into the community and trying to get the community here and sort of meet in the middle.
Along with designing exhibits, Brian helped run the museum, which quickly became a second home.
This place is just fun to exist in and be in a lot of the time. It was a good excuse to not be home sometimes, or like get away from schoolwork and get away from the stress of doing all these other things. And here that all sort of melted away, and it was a place that was like very calming to me to be here.
Around the same time he was curating exhibits, Brian co-authored the book Images of America, Kearney's Historic Homes. About a year after reaching out to Arcadia Publishing, 1,200 copies were printed. As this aspect of Brian's life skyrocketed, his self-esteem stayed on the ground. So he asked for help, but scars were left in the meantime.
You know, certain things sort of worked up to me seeking help outside of home and outside of friend groups.
Okay.
One of those things being and a lot of teenagers found this as an outlet, and I was one of those teenagers, is I would cut myself. And I found that that was an outlet to sort of relieve stress and anxiety, but then that, that just built up and made things worse, inevitably. And I didn't understand that, but I could tell that it was not helping, and it didn't, and it never has and never will.
Moving into college, Brian was still self-conscious about his appearance. He lost 75 pounds within his first 2 years of school. Months went by with him eating no more than 500 calories a day. But he continued to push these personal problems aside and stayed overly involved in other activities. However,
as one side got more successful and as I did more things that I enjoyed, like this other side went even further down.
And it almost cost him his life.
I decided that I was not a good person, and that I was just done. I was just done with it, with the situation, with it all. I was just done. And so I decided that I was going to try and kill myself.
On the night he tried to take his life, Brian went for a drive after taking his sleeping medication. But he specifically remembers noticing the rain as he was nodding off, and he decided death wasn't an option.
So I went home and just sort of rolled into bed and fell asleep. And that night was the bottom of the bottom of anything.
Within a couple of weeks, a professor reached out to Brian, and with time aided him in tearing down the door between his two lives.
That was what sort of junior year was about, was grappling with, this idea that I don't have to lead separate lives, and that people are here to help me. Mm-hmm. And I'm also here to help people if they need that too.
Brian says that while this was a low and destructive time, it turned into a constructive life lesson. As he approaches graduation, his accomplishments pile high, and as he moves on into the world of historical preservation, he strives to make a difference. Brian continues to wear the face of success, but now it represents both his professional and personal life.
It's now my life that I'm living, and it's all just one thing that I'm experiencing and grappling with and learning from.
Clearly, there's more to the lives of Carly, Joe, and Brian than their roles at HC. While their involvements and achievements shape who they are, those are just the tip of the iceberg. It is true that college can serve as a place to start fresh, but we still must consider the previous years leading up to this crucial chapter in life. To know who your peers truly are, you must look below the surface.